Hi, I'm Shayne Hollinger. Welcome into the Ranch Sitdown. Today I've got a guest whose debut album is already shaking things up in the Texas Americana scenes and beyond. He's a singer-songwriter out of Amarillo, Texas, and his new record, Rebel Rose, now out on New West Records, is getting major love. Rolling Stone compared his sound to everything from Jimmy Eat World, the Gin Blossoms, to Steve Earle's Copperhead Road. Ladies and gentlemen, Travis Roberts.
When the timer on the lights don't work, we just drive in the dark to a house on the corner of Jackson and Memorial Park. Only thing we learned in school's how to lose our clothes. What to do if you're lonely and what to do if your husband knows. Do you think that we're too grown to do this now? Do you do it for the rush or to take off the Sunday crowd? And when you tug on my shirt, does it remind you of how it felt when we were young and hungry, undoing the Bible Belt? Back when we would tear through the trailer like two F5s. With one wrong look, we might draw our knives. I hate you for the past, but I love you for tonight. 'Cause you can't close a book when the ink ain't dry. Can't close a book when the ink ain't dry. Well, your four-bedroom house still can't buy you the time of day. And if he left his office, would you even know what to say? You dress the kids up for service and you call me when they're off to bed. But we won that race in a Firebird and you can't get it out of your head. Back when we would tear through the trailer like two F5s. With one wrong look, we might draw our knives. I hate you for the past, but I love you for tonight. But you can't close a book when the ink ain't dry. Can't close a book when the ink ain't dry. Why aren't you ever satisfied? Can't close a book when the ink ain't dry. Dry, 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 dry. Well, you can't close a book. Well, you can't close a book when the ink ain't dry.
Holy cow. Travis Roberts, man. Good to see you again, buddy.
Good
How
to
are
see
you?
I'm great. I'm great. What's the last time we saw each other was up in Steamboat, Colorado?
Steamboat, yeah, and it was a whirlwind, too. It seems like
that's
our
a
lives
crazy week.
become whirlwinds.
We're like two ships passing in a hurricane.
I know, like,
it's beautiful.
and that's pretty much it. That song takes a whole new meaning, really, when you do it acoustic.
Hey, thank you.
I love that.
Thank
That was
you.
cool.
Yeah, that song came from growing up in church, obviously in the Bible Belt, and just a bunch of life just kind of packed into 3 minutes as much as I can.
That is, isn't it? Yeah,
That's it.
It really is. Let's talk about the new album, Rebel Rose.
Yeah.
I understand you cut most of that like live in studio.
Yeah, we cut most of it. We cut most of it with the band, all just in a circle in Arizona with our friends PH Naffah from Roger Klein, with Jeff Linsenmaier-Briolt, who's a very good engineer and good friend of mine, and then Mr. Dalton Domino.
Mm-hmm.
So it ended up being a really fun live record, and I think that shows itself in the actual recordings.
Who are you that you can get all these guys to help you on your first album, your debut album? Like for real?
I'm kind of just hiding out in the middle. You know, I joke all the time that I'm kind of just a walking coincidence and conundrum put together,
right?
You know? And so, like, on my first record, I got to have a song I wrote with Ray Wiley Hubbard. I get to have, you know, Dalton Domino producing and have PH behind the board. And man, it's just, as much as I like to joke about it, it's truly a blessing. It's nothing I could have done on my own.
It's wild how, you know, there's a lot of talented artists out there that fall under the radar. And I love it when a talented artist gets noticed. But it's wild for an artist to get noticed this early in their career like you, with Rolling Stone writing about you, American Songwriter writing about you. Like, it's crazy, man. Like, do you realize how lucky that is?
It's a crazy feeling. I remember when the Rolling Stone article came out, I kind of like heard from my label that, like, hey, there's going to be some articles coming out about you this week. We're doing some press stuff. You're going to love it. And I was like, sweet, that's awesome. And then it was about 5:30 or 6 o'clock in the morning that my wife started poking me and going, hey, your phone keeps going off. You set your alarm too early. And I was like, no, I didn't set my alarm too early, but it just kept going off and going off. And so she said, if you don't get up, I'm going to kick you out of this darn bed. And so I started to roll over and look at my phone. I was like, that's not my alarm. It was my text tone going off.
Holy cow.
And it was a bunch of my songwriter friends who were just like, hey, you should totally check your social media today. And I just, that whole day, I still work a day job. I work for Tarpley Music in Amarillo, Texas. And that whole day, it was just on my phone. I was just getting message after message like, hey, dude, the Rolling Stone wrote about you. And as a kid, obviously looking at Rolling Stone was a dream. You know, it was one of those things that I expected, you know, in like my 10 or 25-year goals.
Right,
but the fact that, you know, before my first record even came out and before I turned 25, to have an article like that and just press and people latching onto this thing and loving it the way they are is truly a blessing. It's a really cool deal.
It's wild. So what do you do at Tarpley?
Oh, so I actually, at the time, I was working as an education guy. So I used to go to the schools and make sure band and orchestra instruments were taken care of, and kids were, you know, I was a lot like the Music Man, you know. I was
just unsticking valves and stuff.
That's it, man.
Yeah,
That's it. I was making sure that we could bring in dented trombone slides and get them fixed up and all that jazz. And man, that was really, really cool. But now I work on the floor. I've just been so busy on the road that, you know, the company is super great. So they've let me keep my job and work with the company in some capacity when I'm not, you know, on the road. And it's a really cool feeling. I mean, it's one of those things where my whole life is music, from when I wake up to when I go to sleep. It's the best life I could have ever imagined.
When did you know music was your thing?
My mom would like to say when I was like 6 years old in my little underwear, saying that I could play this little Wiggles guitar. You know, there's a photo of me that hopefully will never find the light of day, of me just a youngin' in my skivvies with.
Dear God, I'm putting out $100 bounty. If somebody
$100
can
bounty.
find that photo.
You could probably find it. If you send it to my mom, she'd probably wrap me out for $100. But it was me with a Wiggles guitar. But I remember when I first heard Steve Earle's Copperhead Road, I had to be about 11 or 12 years old when I first found that record, and my mom kind of put me on it. And I remember listening to that going like, that's what I want to do. Because I have a big heart for country music, and some of this record is real rock and roll.
Yeah.
But at its heart, it's country music. And so it's one of those things where as soon as I heard that record, it was loud country music. And that's where I just have gravitated towards ever since.
You kind of have, from what I hear, like even just your voice, you kind of have that Steve Earle vibe about you when you're singing a song. Like, there's a lot of depth in the story, you know, and it's like, and that's the cool thing about your record is like, you got to listen to a song 3 times and I hear different things every single time. And like, I get a different story, or that, you know, that movie that rolls in your head when you're listening to a song, you probably have that too. And like, I see this different movie scene all the time and it's like, this is great.
I love to, whenever I write a song, I like to look at it as like, hey, if I'm trying to tell a story, I think the best songs tend to have a couple different stories in them.
Yeah.
One of those, Elephant by Jason Isbell, is like, whenever I think of like writing songs, is like that song, when I look at it, it's like there's 4 different stories you can tell in that song. And all of it still is not like all over the place, because there's some songwriters I know who will just write it out and you'll just be like, what is he talking about?
Right.
But with songs like that, where you can just put a couple stories in the song and people can follow whatever thread they want to follow, that's my favorite kind of songwriting.
Yeah, it's really cool. So, I think, was it Rolling Stone that said you're emphasizing the alt in alt country?
They did,
which is a weird line to say.
They did say that, and I grew up with a lot of punk music and playing a lot of punk, punk and rock music, and so obviously a lot of that pours out into what we make. But it's one of the coolest things where it's like, yeah, I'll take alt in alt country,
right?
But I like to think it's as much alt as it is country. You know?
It's wild how many guys in this scene started doing punk music.
Oh man,
it's crazy. Like doing these interviews, I get a little more in depth with people, and you find that story over and over again.
Like Cody Jinks is one, Colton Wall's one.
Yeah.
I mean, just did a bunch of metal and punk and rock music before they started. It's one of the coolest things.
So you were a rock and roll kid growing up? Well, besides the Wiggles, obviously.
Yeah, the Wiggles is a pinnacle of rock music innovation.
That's the anthem. Yeah.
It's one of the things where, I grew up on a lot of rock music, and I played a lot of it, and I lived my life like a rock and roller for a real long time, and then I finally had to slow that down in about 2020, and it's one of those things where, like, it's still fun to play rock and roll music, but be able to wake up at a decent hour and go to work, you know? It's one of those cool feelings where I used to not be able to do that, but I love rock and roll music. I think rock and roll is still alive and kicking, and my favorite rock and roll hides in country music nowadays.
Absolutely, it really does. Yeah, you're a young man, but you've lived a life. You really have, and you fought some demons in some battles. And is it okay to talk?
Yeah,
about
absolutely,
okay.
Absolutely.
Went through addiction problems, and you've overcome that.
Yeah, I mean, it's still a daily struggle, but it's one of those things where it gets easier, but it never gets easy. And so it's one of those things where, like,
Jason Isbell song
another
there.
Jason Isbell,
exactly.
You know. But it's one of those things where it's like it gets easier, but it never gets easy. I used to have to put my hand in the cookie jar to think that I could feel full, but I don't have to do that anymore.
That's a great place to be.
And it's one of those things where, like, I wake up in the morning, and sure, I don't have a lot. Obviously, if you didn't know, most of your favorite songwriters starting out aren't doing fantastic. They kind of got to build it up. But it's one of those things where nowadays, whenever I wake up, even if I just have a little, I have everything I need in my life. You know, I'd like to joke with my wife in the mornings whenever we talk that anytime I'm telling her a story and she's like, "When the heck did that happen?" I love to tell her that, you know, I'm a pretty young car. I'm pretty much like a 2000s Camry, but I put a whole lot of miles on it.
You got 400,000 miles
400,000 miles on it, and it's a miracle that it keeps on kicking, and I'm just living on the miracle right now.
That is wild. So Amarillo, Texas, not always mentioned as a big music mecca town. How is the scene in Amarillo?
So I think that if you want to know how the scene in Amarillo sounds, my record is a good option to kind of get a peek in, because Amarillo may not have like a specific scene. Like, we have some really great artists out there. There's a kid named Logan Ellis who's really kicking it out there, making some really cool music. Rhett Euland, I cut one of his songs on my record, and he's a fantastic songwriter. And then there's a lot of punk and metal music out there.
Really?
And it's one of those things where, you know, we have WRCA out there. And so it's one of those things where there's a lot of cowboys and there's a lot of country music, but they tend to like more of the Bob Wills stuff and the traditional swing stuff, and that's a kick. And it's always fun when, you know, an Americana or a Texas country artist come through, because people love it. They love Randy Rogers. They love Josh Abbott.
Yeah.
That still all exists out there. But it's one of those things where it's like, if you just peel back the onion a little bit, you'll see at every dive bar on historic Route 66, you'll have country music 3 nights of the week, and then 2 nights of the week is just loud, rowdy metal and rock music.
That's wild.
And it's one of the coolest things on earth to get to live there, because if you're one of those alts in the alt country crowd, it's a cool spot to catch a show for sure, because you feel right at home.
It's got to be a weird place to grow up. It could be 110 or -60.
See, and that's how I feel as we go into October. You know, it's been real hot, though it's been historically kind of cool for the summer. We've only had 5 days going over 100 degrees at the airport.
In this area too, in the Fort Worth area
it hadn't been super hot, but it's one of those things where when it gets cold, high desert cold. And it's, you know, I remember whenever we were cutting the record, the second half of the record we cut, I think it was in February, and we drove out to Arizona, and it was, you know, obviously nice and 90 degrees. It was hot, it was warm, and in February, that's crazy for us. But as we drove back, I remember getting to New Mexico, and it was like, it's 50 degrees outside, and none of us packed a jacket. And so we stopped outside of a Love's.
Boys.
That's it. We stopped at a Love's to get gas, and we're shivering, you know. And then when we got back to Amarillo, it was something like 30 degrees, and there was ice on the roads, and we were all freaking out.
Wow.
It just felt like a culture shock in a full 24-hour period.
Out of all the tracks on the new album, which one for you felt the most personal, or maybe the hardest to get down on tape?
It's definitely All My Friends. All My Friends is, I don't want to be known as like a sobriety songwriter.
Right.
Though those are great songs.
Yeah.
I feel like I have a lot more to bring to the table than that.
Absolutely.
But when I wrote All My Friends, we were talking about how we were going to record it. And I remember being in the control booth with PH and Dalton. And we were just like, well, let's just go check the mics first before we really start to sit down and do what we need to do. And I was freaking out. We have this thing in recording called red light fever, where it's like as soon as you see that red light turn on, all of a sudden you start freaking out. You're like, is this great? Is this going to be what I want it to be? That we were just checking the mics, and they just told me to play through the song one time, and I played through it, and Dalton and PH said, all right, All My Friends is done. And that's the version that made it on the record, was us checking the mic. We didn't do it for a little industry peak. We didn't have a mic even close to my face. That was just a pencil microphone pointed at the acoustic guitar vertically. So that song is just a little bit of reverb on that.
Yeah, that's why it sounds like that. Okay, it makes sense.
That's the whole thing.
That is so wild. That is so wild. Do you have a favorite memory from recording this album?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, definitely. Boy, that was quick.
I remember one night, it was probably 11 o'clock. We told ourselves that we were going to be, professionals. We were going to leave the building at like 10, and we would be done for the day, and we'd go back. But knowing Dalton Domino, nothing ever ends on the professional note. And so we were staying up, and we were working on this song that's on the record called Minefields, which is definitely a rock and roll song right in the middle of it. There's a lot of pop punk and emo influence on that song. And so as we went to cut Minefields, I'll never forget, it's 11 o'clock at night. It's hot in the control room. Dalton's got a baritone guitar in hand, and we just all took off our shirts because of how hot it was. And so it was just 4 shirtless dudes in the control booth just shredding on electric guitars, trying to make Minefields fit. And there's a video of it that exists and kind of bounces around pretty much every year anniversary of that moment.
Right.
But that's definitely one of my favorite moments because it was probably some of the most fun I've ever had making music.
It's a moment you will remember the rest of your life.
The rest of my life.
Definitely.
Just sitting in a control room chair and just seeing. And Dalton Domino is one of my heroes. And it's one of those things where I could just sit there and watch that dude just do what he does.
Yeah.
And man, that'll always leave an impression on me.
It's wild no matter what he does.
Yeah.
He does it really, really well.
He does it really, really well.
So wild.
He managed me for a while. He helped make this record. I've had the privilege of playing a couple song swaps with him, a couple shows. He is just, whenever I think of a songwriter and a peak performer, somebody who knows what they're doing when they walk in to do it, that's Dalton.
He's been praising you to me for years now.
He is such a kind dude too.
And I love, like, Dalton's the guy that introduced me to Flatland Cavalry. I mean, it's like, it's constantly, he loves to like share new stuff with people who care about music.
Absolutely. He's the guy who got me into songwriting. I mean, songwriting is a really big part of what I do now. I write for other people as well as write for myself. And so I'll never forget whenever he introduced me to Jordan Nix and we wrote a song called Air It Out that Jordan cut. And I'll never forget the first time he introduced me to Slade Coulter. And Slade Coulter and I have now written songs for both of Slade's records. And going onward, I never knew that he was 90 minutes down the road from me. And Dalton introduced me to him.
Oh, wild, yeah.
And I met all of my good friends, Shelby Stone, Jacob Stelly. I mean, all those guys I met through Dalton. And I could never be more grateful for that.
That is pretty cool. So on this new album, there are some you said Ray.
Yeah, I wrote a song called Hereford Blues with Ray Wiley Hubbard.
Yeah.
That was an accidental write. And most of the time, there's not accidental songwriting. But I remember we were on a bus in Borger, Texas.
Oh, man.
And a big town of Borger, Texas, north of Amarillo, about an hour. And he was playing this benefit, and Dalton points me to Ray and goes, hey, he's going to be near you. You should go say hi, and you should go hang out with him. And so Ray was showing me a bunch of guitar picking stuff, and we were just hanging out. Obviously, one of the coolest experiences in my whole musical career. And I started showing him this song called Hereford Blues, and we didn't know if we were going to put it on the record or not. We had done the first session of the record, but not the second one. And so we sit down to do this thing. I'm showing him this song, and it's just basic blues stuff. And then I start singing this line about singing in Spanish or talking in Spanish, and my Spanish not being too good. And Ray goes, well, why don't you just do the next line in bad Spanish? And I just went, all right, that's why you're Ray Wiley Hubbard,
yes, sir.
And I'm the kid from Amarillo. And so I did it in Spanish. And my favorite thing about the record is whenever I actually do that take, I mess up the line. And that's 100% organic of me just messing up that line. And Dalton was like, yeah, that's the take. You can hear him just mess up Spanish, and it works.
So, yeah, we're going to do that. It's going to happen all the time.
And it was such a fun song to write with Ray. And then Rhett Euland was the other writer on the record. It's the first time I've ever done what we call in the industry a cut. And it was a song called Arapaho. Rhett Euland and I kind of came up as we were writing songs at the same time, playing shows, talking to our local radio DJs, playing the same rooms. And he had this song called Arapaho that Dalton loved. And he was like, you just need to record that song. That song needs to get out farther than it already has. And I was like, for sure. And that's one of my favorite songs on the record. It's definitely the countryest song on the record.
Yeah,
if you're looking
definitely.
for country music,
absolutely.
Country music, that's the one. Go find a rapper.
Country music.
Country music. That's where
you
find
got your Amarillo voice in there for a
it.
second.
It can sneak in for a
Does
bit.
it? So, making a debut album is pretty eye-opening for anybody. What was the most surprising aspect of making an album you didn't know about?
Oh, it's the it takes a village part. I never knew how many hands were on some of my favorite albums of all time, and so Dalton got me my record deal. He introduced me to the people at New West, and New West just have so many good people on staff who do so many little things that you would never think about whenever it comes to making a record. For example, I spent one day at New West Records at the office upstairs for about 4 hours where we were just recording thank you notes, just like thank you notes to record stores for like, hey, thank you for buying the record. Hey, thank you for pre-ordering copies of the record. You should go get your copy at your local independent record store. And I did some of that for like 4 hours. And I never would have thought in my head that would be something that you do.
Yeah.
But it was one of the most surprising things that I would get messages from these record stores. And they would be like, hey, thank you so much for mentioning us. You know, we love your record. It's such a cool deal. We'll buy a couple more copies. We appreciate you.
So it worked.
Yeah, and it worked. And it worked.
Great.
And especially for like me not really having a name, especially when the record first came out, it was one of the coolest things to go like, oh my gosh, they know who I am. But it was because I recorded this thing that I didn't know I should have recorded.
Doing those little things,
that was
man,
it.
makes a world of difference.
That's a debut record for you. That's what it looks like.
That is so wild. So one last question, and I heard this story, and I don't know if you don't want to talk about it, it's completely fine.
Go ahead.
The Underground Fight Club. Is this a
asked,
true story?
Yes, I get asked about this in every interview.
Do you really?
I do.
Well, I'm sorry then.
No,
Never mind. I don't want to talk about it.
No, it's all right. Let's talk about it because I love to clear the air on this because whenever somebody says...
Because I didn't know you were allowed to talk about it. I've seen the movie. Come
exactly.
on.
I'm not Ed Norton, but I will talk about it because it's just a funny story. So whenever the label was asking how I paid for the record the first time, I told them that I didn't know how else to say this in a professional setting. We're like, hey, I really want you to buy my record, you know?
Right.
And so I went, I actually was fighting at a time. I was boxing. And whenever I say Underground Fight Club, it is kind of like what it sounds like.
Cooler.
I had a bunch of friends of mine who we all love boxing. We love boxing to death. I've loved boxing since I was a kid. And it was one of those things where it's like, why don't we all try our hands at it? So we'd go to the same gym. We'd all practice, you know, we'd all spar. We'd all have a good time. And then eventually we went, well, why don't we just fight? Find each other of us and who are in similar weight classes and we'll just fight. And so we ended up meeting, and I can't tell you where we met for state purposes because I don't want to go to jail for it.
Right.
But we would meet up and we would fight each other.
Not allowed at that Walmart anymore.
Yeah, it's not at that underneath the Walmart on Georgia in Amarillo. Definitely not there. But it was one of those things where we would do this thing where we would fight and our buddies would start placing bets. And I remember distinctly one moment with a buddy of mine when I saw him with a wad of cash in his hand, and I went, hey, are y'all betting and neither of us are getting paid for this? I'm like, I'm getting punched in the face. Yeah. And we were doing this on a monthly basis. I was
my God.
I was like, I'm getting punched in the face about once a month, you know?
I'm not making
any money. So they started splitting these bets between us. And I'll never forget the first time I got a little money in my hand, I had lost. And then the other guy made a little more money than me because he won. And I guess the bets leaned his way. But I'll never forget just having a little money in my hand and going, well, if I do this for like 14 months, then I should have enough for like 2 singles at a studio in Amarillo. And so it was a combination of that and some money my grandmother gave me that I went to Dalton and said, hey, can we go cut a record, please? And he's like, you could get 4 songs
like
on
there's
this.
blood on this money.
That's it. There's blood on this money. And I'll never forget going into New West and going like, all right, guys, so we want to cut a second half of this record. And they said, well, the first thing you have to do is quit getting your face bashed in because we need to be able to try to sell whatever semblance of your identity there is.
Right.
And so thankfully my nose and my teeth are somewhat still intact. And it makes for a funny story.
Man, if you ever make it like really, really big and you get on the late night TV shows, that's the story you tell.
Oh, yeah.
That's the great story to tell.
That one's straight to the host.
Kimmel will love that.
Yeah, right.
It'll be great. It'll be great. Well, Travis Roberts, how about one more song from you, buddy?
Yeah, absolutely. I will pay you, or I'll play you.
Okay, I'll pay. You can pay me.
Yeah,
whatever.
I will not pay you, but I will play you.
You get accused of that all the time.
That's
Go ahead.
it, right? I'll play you the title track off the record. It's called Rebel Rose.
Cool.
Rosie, aren't you tired of being a rebel? Ain't running been too much trouble. Your mama couldn't sleep for days and she called half the county for you. You got way too high on a Christmas Eve and forgot to wear your good long sleeve. We're stopping at the quick sack 'cause it looks like you ain't ate in weeks. Mm-hmm. Little girl talking about your tattoo, the snake on your arm, what's he gonna do? Might look like he bites, but we all know you couldn't hurt a fly. 'Cause if she knew half the things you did, where you got the money, the place you slept, she'd put on a hazmat suit and run as far as she could away. My dear Rosie, aren't you tired of being a rebel? My dear Rosie, aren't you tired of being a rebel? Right about now. You've been the black sheep all your life, 7-fold records and switchblade knives, always on the rougher side until it finally got rough on you. Well, it started out as I can't sleep, harder stuff is just a bit more cheap, and you mix your wine with quick relief, saying it could never be me. My dear Rosie, aren't you tired of being a rebel? My dear Rosie, aren't you tired of being a rebel? Oh, right about now, your daddy would be screaming like a banshee if he saw this little girl inside that shell. He'd kill every pusher and knock the world down to size, 'cause love is war, and honey, war is hell. 'Cause love is war, honey, war is hell. You never told him about the nice young man, not behind the Tellico Dam, balling outside the clinic while you were banging on the dash, screaming, how could you ever be so dumb? How did it ever happen to you that young? And now you're sweating out the memories, spending New Year's on your mama's couch. Spending New Year's on your mama's couch. My dear Rosie, aren't you tired of being a rebel? My dear Rosie, aren't you tired of being a rebel? My dear Rosie, aren't you tired of being a rebel? Right about now. Right about now.
Got that kind of Ryan Adams Whiskey Town vibe about that.
There's a lot of that bleeds into what I do.
That's awesome. Travis Roberts, man, thank you so much.
Shayne,
man.
thank you for having me. I love the
you.
ranch. Anytime I'm in Fort Worth, this is a cool station to listen to.
Remember us when you're on those late night TV shows too, if you don't mind.
Of course, of course.
His new album's called Rebel Rose. Pick it up right now. It's Travis Roberts from Amarillo, Texas.